I'm Mark Boris, and this is Straight Talk.
When they write the book about cancel culture, there will be a page for this moment, which was
Josh Szeps. Welcome to Straight Talk.
Everything is messy. I think the only solution is conversations. To be on the right side of history at the moment, you have to adhere to a certain set of social justice dogmas or orthodoxies. And if you stray from those, you get whacked. Oh, you're always asking the tricky questions, Mark. I mean, something's happening to our brains and the way that they're being hijacked that is making it increasingly difficult to have contrarian conversations. I honestly think that's the only way we're going to solve the problems of the 21st century, Mark.
You have been on Joe Rogan's show 6 or 7 times. I can't remember now.
7. Don't short sell me. Yeah.
What the fuck's going on there? Like, I know you got the fringe going on.
Yeah, we got,
a good do.
Oh, what this?
Yeah, for people who
it's nice,
look at that.
It? Yeah, look
for
at
people
that.
who have never actually met Josh Szeps.
A bit of blue steel.
Look at that.
It's right there.
Yeah, right down the camera.
Yeah, no.
He's not just a voice.
I'm not just a voice. It's funny because now that we're on YouTube, people start to recognise me on the streets and they say all kinds of kind things, when they recognise me.
Oh, you're Josh Szeps.
You know. Yeah, they go, oh, I love your show. And I'll be like, well, where were you when I was only a voice? They didn't know. When you're only a voice or a name.
But I need to say welcome to Straight Talk.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And it's very nice to meet you, and actually nice to meet you in person. But more importantly, I need to tell you that I used to really love listening to you when you were relieving others in the morning, and
relieving others in the morning.
I didn't mean that.
when I was jerking off other gentlemen in a public toilet every morning. 6 a.m. my alarm would go off. I'd go down to the bar, the local public restrooms, and relieve a couple of frustrated
what
gentlemen.
Call you?
Alan Jones thanks me.
You're a locum.
I did the breakfast show on ABC Radio Sydney for
and I used to listen to it
a number of years.
And I was thinking to myself, the greatest respect to the ABC, please don't get shitty with me. This guy's bloody smart. He's brought a bit of intellect to the show. In other words, it wasn't like literally, what I'm talking about, the headlines or whatever. You actually put looked like you're putting some research into it. Looked like you're putting your own research into it to me.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Is
Absolutely.
That the
I
case?
I want to do the things that interest me. And I think that if you're actually interested in something, then other people will follow you because your intellectual curiosity will carry them along in its wake. There's nothing more delightful than turning on something that you expect to be one thing and then it's just slightly different or it's slightly skewing. Oh, I never thought about it that way, or I didn't know about that. So I've never been the type of person who joins an organisation or an institution in order to just follow rules and do things exactly the way that I'm told to, because I think that's just a bit stale. You end up everything ends up sounding the same.
It is because it's boring for you.
Boring for them. No, boring for them. I mean, yes, of course, it's boring for me. So I mean, there's some self-interest in pursuing my own interests, but I think it's boring for the audience. I think something that's happening in the media at the moment. We can get to this. Is that a lot of stuff sounds basically the same with the same kinds of opinions that are the correct opinions to have about sensitive issues. So there's a whole suite of topics that if you turn on the ABC or you turn on Sky News After Dark or Fox News or something like that, you're pretty confident. You could jot on the back of a napkin before anyone starts talking what they're going to sound like when they're talking about climate change or transgender athletes or, gay pride or Mardi Gras or women's equality or Black Lives Matter or whatever it might be. And I'm just more interested in following my own curiosity and trying to figure out what's true and paying no heed to the way that you're supposed to talk about things. And that doesn't always mesh perfectly into an institution, an institutional environment. It didn't for me.
Well, let's talk about that then, since you've gone to that territory. I listen to the ABC because my mum listened to the ABC, and my mother had the ABC on all day, and I can go back to the ABC. What's Adam's name? The mathematician, Adam
Spencer.
Adam Spencer,
Great guy.
I just love him.
Yeah,
and it's sort of to me that the ABC stopped being the ABC when sort of around about when he left. To me, it changed. And
in what way?
Well, it became more. The same issues were being talked about which were outside the norm. They were issues that, like you just mentioned, some gender equality, I don't know, Palestine, Israel, and taking a position. They're not in the middle. They're taking a position. So they're definitely not reporting the news as a as unbiased news. There's a bias, which is fine. I mean, there's a bias everywhere, but they were expressing their bias in the news. Prior to that, around the Adam Spencer period and way before that, it was very down the middle to me. It was very not conservative based, but straightforward news about what's actually happened without a view, without an opinion. There was no opinion associated. It was more about facts. And I think today, like you just said, I pretty much know what I'm going to get. Just like when I listen to Sky News at 9 p.m, I know exactly what I'm going to get out of them too.
Yeah.
So much so, Josh, that what I do is I still have the ABC in the morning, and I get my full belly of what would ordinarily be associated with the left and other groups that sort of fit within the left, Greens, etc. I get my full belly of that, and then in the night I put on Sky News so I can get my full belly of the right.
And you can go to bed sufficiently outraged at the world.
And then I can just sort of. Sometimes I am, but mostly what I do is I'm balanced, and I feel as though the news world, I justify one against the other. They're both sort of so far out on the edge of the spectrum that there's not that much in the middle anymore, because I get that stuff in the middle. I get that fed to me by Instagram, Facebook, all the other mediums. I mean, and I know the news before it appears on mainstream.
Of course, yeah. I mean, as we all do. I mean, it's immensely frustrating to me to hear you say that you know what you're going to get from both sides, and therefore you have to put up with this level of kind of tacit unconscious bias that's coming from places that you ought to be able to trust.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what I'm trying to do on Uncomfortable Conversations and what I know you do every day is basically wrestle with big issues in ways that disregard the tripwires and the landmines, and allow myself
and the punishment.
And the punishment. I don't care about the punishment, obviously, given that I ended up being sort of, my radio show ended up falling apart. I can't stomach the idea that we're going to give away our ability to have complicated, uncomfortable conversations about the most important problems that we face in the 21st century to people who have their thumb on the scale one way or another, and then we're going to individually try to grope our way towards whatever is true or rational or reasonable on the basis of these two sort of biased interpretations that are coming to us through their own prisms. Like, why not just do away with the prisms altogether and just get straight to the point and talk to each other like we're grown-ups and say, if I say something that comes across the wrong way or that offends you, tell me why it's wrong. Tell me what's wrong about it. Tell me where I've erred. Don't play a game of gotcha. Don't try to get me fired because I said the wrong thing. There's so much timidity. There's so much caution. There's so much risk aversion in the media at the moment that I think, like, a lot of the bias is not intentional bias. It's coming from the soup that we swim in. And part of this is to do with the welcome reaction to what had previously been a fairly straight white male profession of journalism, right? So, over the past 10 or 20 years, there's been a push for more diversity. I think that's a great thing. I think more people of colour and more women should be in newsrooms. At the same time, they have to adhere to the original founding principles of institutional journalism, which is objectivity. You can't come in saying, like, I'm going to tell my own story, or like, as an Arab woman, I'm going to focus on Gaza in this particular way. No. As an Arab woman, you're going to be a bloody journalist, and you're going to do your job as a journalist. That's what a newsroom is about. You're not going to come in and say, oh, well, you have to see things from my perspective. No, we're not going for perspectives. Yes, there'll always be bias. Yes, we always bring things to the table. No one has a position in heaven, standing on the clouds, looking at everything objectively. That's impossible. But you can use that as an aspiration. You can rely on facts. You can say, I'm not going to allow my own background to influence this. And I think there's a fundamental tension between the desire for objectivity on the one hand and this newer social justice desire to tell broader truths with a capital T that take down the man and that achieve some social justice, point. And I think that's what people are smelling at the moment, that everything seems to be loaded, at least in the left-wing press, with a social justice point instead of just giving people the facts. And I think we're just going to have to go through an adjustment period where newsrooms get back to being about the facts. And then on the content side, so content is like the fancy broadcasting term for anything that's not journalism, right? So I mean, my show on the ABC was not a news show. It was on ABC Radio Sydney. It was talkback. We'd sometimes talk to chefs about cooking. We'd sometimes, you talk about everything, anything and everything. And in that sphere, I actually think there should be more tolerance of and respect for different opinions and having the opinion of the presenter or the host come through. I don't think I should be required to be as objective as the person who's delivering the 7 p.m. news if I'm hosting a 3-hour-long daily talkback radio show. So I think at the moment, everything's in flux. People don't know where they stand. Journalists feel like they're allowed to bring their whole selves to work and tell their own stories in ways that undermine objectivity. But commentators at the same time feel impeded from going out on a limb and talking about things in a bullshit-free manner because they're afraid that they're going to trigger a tripwire and all hell's going to break loose because they said the wrong thing and they offended the social justice dogmas that they're supposed to adhere to.
So, but how did that happen? I don't know, but you may well be closer to being an ABC historian yourself than I am, but what happened at the ABC, for example, that created the current outcome? And I just want to say this as well. Equally, Sky News at a certain time of night has felt the need to defend the other side, the other argument, and they prosecute equally as hard, but on the opposite side of the fence.
Oh, yeah, or harder. I mean, Sky News has less fidelity to... I don't want this to seem like I'm ragging on the ABC because I actually think that the public broadcaster is in a pickle, is a national treasure and needs to be sort of protected and defended. And one of the reasons why it is currently so cowed, I think, and so fearful and so cautious is because it's under constant attack from disingenuous conservative politicians and Sky News figures who are always on about how biased the ABC is, right? There has to be some space for the ABC to be able to stand up and have a backbone and go, no, like just quit it. The ABC still does great investigative journalism. It still has great journalists who are working there. I think the how did it get here is really complicated and has a lot to do with changing viewing patterns, changing listening patterns, the democratization of the media, social media, YouTube. Like that stuff has meant that people no longer are tethered to a public broadcaster the way that they might have been even just 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago. And so now that you can get so much of your information from Joe Rogan or Peter Attia or whoever it might be, or a Josh Szeps or a Mark Burris, there's just more choice. And so then the ABC goes, well, what is the purpose of the ABC? And the purpose of the ABC really fundamentally should be to create a town square in which everybody feels like they're being given a fair shake, in which everybody feels like their voice is being heard, in which the most important issues of the day can be wrestled with without fear or favour. But that's going to piss people off by definition because you're going to have a whole bunch of voices. If you're actually doing that, then you wouldn't just be in lockstep with, I don't know, just to pick an example of one fight that I got into with ABC management with Mardi Gras, for example. I was in a position where I'm an openly gay guy. I'm married to a guy. I wrote an op-ed for the Sydney Morning Herald during World Pride, which was a big gay pride event last year during Mardi Gras. I was just sort of saying, like, will there ever come a point at which we can turn the volume down instead of turning the volume up on our identitarian difference? Like when it's not that important
You're sort of saying,
to be gay?
Bit over it.
Bit over it.
Yeah.
Bit over it. Like how much equality will we have to get before we don't have to, wear arseless chaps and sit astride a giant inflatable penis on Oxford Street, smothered in baby oil with waxed chests? Does there ever come a point at which we're just like... What I have achieved, I mean, through no thanks to me, but through giving thanks to the early gay rights pioneers, the gay activists of the Stonewall era, the 60s and 70s, what I've achieved is a everything they dreamed of, which is I've got a boring life. It's unremarkable. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I tell someone I'm gay and I'm married to a guy, and they're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
They don't laugh.
Really?
They don't beat me up, you know. I mean, yes, it's very privileged. I'm middle class. I'm white. Whatever. I'm sure it's different if you're growing up in a Muslim Australian household in the southwest of Sydney. But for me, we've achieved everything that we wanted to achieve. So my article was basically just saying, like, you know, will there ever come a point at which we actually achieve greater individual flourishing, greater sexual fulfillment by not really caring about labels and just falling in love with who you fall in love with, getting your rocks off with whoever you want to get your rocks off with, and we don't.
It's not going to improve your sex life, that's for sure. And why, if they could, you know what I mean? It's not going to improve your sex life.
No.
I mean, I'm saying
So I tried to publish this thing, and when you're a host, when you have a contract at any organisation, any media organisation, you have to get sign-off from management for any external work to be approved.
Where was it being published?
In their Sydney Morning Herald. Right. And this was going to be the opinion piece on the weekend of Gay Pride. So it would have thrown a few.
It was sort of like an op-ed.
Yeah, it was an op-ed, yeah. And, you know, it went all the way up the chain, and management wouldn't allow it to be published because
Why?
they said that hosts can't take positions on controversial cultural issues, right? Which in principle is, I suppose, fair enough. It's a public broadcaster. You want me to seem impartial. You don't want there to be an appearance of bias. The problem is, at the time, the ABC was the official broadcast partner of World Pride and of Mardi Gras. In the lobby, there are gigantic rainbow flags. Every other presenter, every other host on the station, all of them not gay, or not to the best of my knowledge, is singing the praises of how fabulous it is. You know, join us tonight for our live streaming coverage of the parade. Every second promo is about the parade, is about how fabulous it is. We've got all these guests of diverse genders and sexualities and whatever. The one gay host is not allowed to pipe up and go, do we really need it? Right? So it struck me that it's not that hosts can't have an opinion about culturally provocative issues. It's just that it has to be management's position.
Yeah.
It has to be the right position.
You have to fall into line.
On the right side of history. Why does Josh keep wanting to, you know, kick a hornet's nest? Why does he keep wanting to upset the apple cart? Well, I don't know, because I'm interested in ideas. I'm interested in thinking things through. I'm interested in not being a conformist. I'm interested in going, well, okay, why was Mardi Gras so crucial? Will it ever not be crucial? At what point does that happen? Like, let's just talk about it. Let's just talk about it. But you can't talk about it because that transgresses an unspoken boundary, which is that to be on the right side of history at the moment, you have to adhere to a certain set of social justice dogmas or orthodoxies. And if you stray from those, you get whacked.
So who? I mean, I've always been curious about this. But who creates these social justice dogmas? Like, I mean, I often wonder myself: is there a group of people somewhere who are silent and we don't get to see them, who actually are out there manipulating all these social justice dogmas? There are BLM, et cetera. Like,
yeah.
I
think it's a largely white, largely middle class, university educated elite of people who talk to each other in certain ways, and
who probably don't fit into any of the categories.
No, often they don't. You see this a lot in like the transgender wars, which is probably the most toxic or sensitive issue at the moment.
Or even the Gaza thing at the moment.
Or Gaza, right
now. So, and what I mean, I'm curious as to your opinion on these things. There's no doubt you thought about it. Is it guilt based? Are they feeling guilty?
Yes.
And is this some way of them washing their guilt?
Yes.
And but therefore it's dangerous.
Well, it may not be dangerous. It may just be dull, and it may be conformist, and it may be.
But it's dull to you, dangerous to somebody who'll be influenced by it, potentially.
Oh, you mean they think that it's dangerous to step outside the bounds, or you think it's...
No, I think it's dangerous for people who might be watching it and following it and being influenced by it. Unnecessarily influenced, without people being able to make up their own opinions. Some people can't draw their own opinions. You know that,
right?
They're heavily influenced by what other people say, what institutions say, what individuals say.
Yeah.
but maybe that's just how world is today. By the way, we might not be able to change it, but I think it's dangerous to people who are influenced by it, and I worry about that. So
what's an example of the
Palestine,
danger?
the university. So I was listening to, admittedly, it was 2GB, but I was listening to 2GB this morning, and my old mate Ben's on there. He's not always young, and he was talking to some correspondent they have in the US, and the US was talking about the university protests, let's call them protests, riots are going on some of the universities, particularly in Ohio. And he made the comment that, isn't it funny that all the students from New York, Ohio, and UCLA had exactly the same tents? They had somehow managed to garner, hundreds of tents made by exactly the same company, looking exactly the same. And these tents were all pitched on the lawns, and it was all coordinated. And the question then becomes, well, how many of those people are actually students at the university? And it seems as though not a lot of them were not students, actual students of the university, and they were occupying territories, parts of the campuses, and they were protesting against Israel and in favour of Palestine, which is fair enough. That's an opinion. That's cool. But it looked like to me it was extraordinarily well organised, and the way the media cover it is as if it's a truth.
Right, or a spontaneously erupting.
And it shits me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened in Sydney University this week, but maybe it was the same thing. But this is organised disruption to create a problem that looks as though it's students free thinking, like student campuses used to be, free thinking, like you're saying, let's have a discussion about it. But students have all got together and they've actually got a view, when in actual fact that's not the case. It's well organised by others outside of the university. And then the media's going to report it as it being the truth.
Yeah.
And that kills me.
And and that's right. And that points to the sort of double standard as well, which is similar to the Mardi Gras gay rights thing, in the sense that I actually just finished doing my first live video talkback episode of Uncomfortable Conversations, where the audience can actually join in. And one of the questions was about this, was about the Columbia University protests. And I made the point that if you had a group of people, so now, some of these institutions over there, Jewish academics and Jewish students have been told by the police not to come to class because they're worried that they can't control the violence. You've got slogans which verge on being anti-Semitic, if not they're openly anti-Semitic.
I would say they are.
Yeah. And if any other group was conducting protests like this against a minority, just imagine that it's Make America Great Again, white dudes wearing red trucker hats, and they're going off against Black Lives Matter, for example, and intimidating black students. How much would the conversation be what it currently is, which is university academics very earnestly stroking their chins and going, well, free speech is important on campus and there's a great and venerable tradition of protest on campus? There would be none of that. They would have been out of there on the first day. There would be no conversation about the free speech rights of white people to harass and intimidate and question the existence of black Americans. Now, if that's the policy, then what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and those people should have been out of there as soon as they started protesting.
So why were they delayed? Well, why did the mayor not call the police in, or why did the vice chancellor?
No, I'm not saying they should. You could also take a free speech position and say that this is legitimate, and it would also be legitimate if you had right-wingers banging on about, transgender students or whatever it might be. But be consistent. So why is there an inconsistency? Comes back to that set of social justice dogmas and orthodoxies that have become insinuated into society and culture. And as you pointed out, I don't think it's mostly Palestinians who are doing this on the Palestine issue, and I don't think it's mostly transgender people who are doing it on the trans issue, and I don't think it's mostly actually people of colour who are doing it on the Black Lives Matter issue. I think it is a class of self-congratulatory people, and I think guilt is an interesting thing for you to flag there, because it's something we don't talk about enough. But I think that we have evolved into this sort of post-colonial anti-racist mindset where And it's a laudable instinct. It's a laudable instinct to try to catch ourselves and go, well, all right, let's recognize our white privilege. Let's recognize the evils of colonialism. But as a result, we're seeing the world through a frame where if you're poor and brown-skinned, you're the good guy. And if you're standing up in a suit and you look like a white straight male, you're by definition the bad guy. So complicated issues like Israel and Palestine get reduced into this very overly simplistic oppressor versus oppressed, colonizer versus colonized sort of binary. And living inside that trap, there's no way out. It's got its own weird internal logic. Even if it's orchestrated, like as you say with the tents and so on, or not orchestrated, just because it's a way of people making sense of the world. I mean, I think a lot of it is just, a lot of the groupthink is just a combination of people trying to make sense of a complicated world, being handed an easy interpretation of the world, which is that white straight men have been pissing all over everybody for thousands of years, and now it's time for their comeuppance. And so we need to give more diverse voices, allow more diverse voices to be heard. And then the other component of it is the backlash and the threat that you get from, what we might call cancel culture, where if you step out of line, people don't come back to try to articulate why they think you're wrong. They go straight for the jugular and they try to destroy your life, whether that's on social media or by getting you fired or by severing your relationships with your publisher or whatever, or your podcast network or whatever it might be. So there's a kind of a hysteria, a censoriousness, an oversimplification. And all I'm trying to do is have conversations that pay no heed to any of that and that make sense, that like both sides could listen to, and you might agree with me or disagree with me, but at least I'll be articulating your worldview in a way that is generous to you and that makes sense to you. I mean, I think this is such a problem now, Mark, that we're demonizing the other side and caricaturing the other side. So you ask one of those protesters to articulate what the Zionist position is. They can't do it. And you ask a hardcore Zionist to articulate the Palestinian position, and they probably can't do it. And you can go through any number of different things. The left has become extremely sanctimonious on this stuff, so much so that it can't even see its own blind spots. It can't even see its own biases. Why wouldn't you just want to be nice to gay people? Why would you want to raise questions about Mardi Gras? What are you trying to do here? It's like the old parable about the two fish swimming along in the water, and the young fish, and the big fish swims past them and goes, "How's the water today, guys?" And after the big fish swims away, one of the little fish turns to the other one and goes, "What's water?" You don't know water when you're in it. You don't know the norms that you've inherited that are just part of the air that you breathe. There's a certain way of talking about this. There's a certain way of talking about that. Stop making trouble, I think, is the overarching sentiment of that kind of social justice, like elite clique.
What can I ask you then, just on the topic of freedom of speech, for example? I mean, it's a broad topic, I know, and it's got lots of constraints. But just on this blue that's sort of bubbling around between Albanese pitching up and sort of saying that he's going to take Musk on in relation to, I think it relates to the more recent stabbing of the priest, the Orthodox priest out in the west suburb of Sydney, and whether or not, largely whether kids should be allowed to see it, but really, whether anyone should be allowed to see it. And Musk's position, of course, as I understand it, Musk's position is that no, we should be allowed to see anything, and we shouldn't be censoring anything. This is just a medium, and people can put up whatever they want to have a look at. What do you think about the government's? What do you think about governments taking a stand on something like that against, forget about Musk's position, but what do you think about governments taking a stand on that in terms of representing us, the voters?
It's complicated, like so much. I am a
or
big
is it?
free.
Isn't it just simple?
Well, what's the simple answer?
Then it's freedom of speech. Not even freedom. It's not that. It's not freedom of speech. This is a platform. If you don't want to look at it, don't open it up.
Right.
And you're a parent, and if you're worried about your kids, don't let them look at it.
Right.
Take control.
To some extent, Yes, but I think where we get confused on social media, and I'm a big free speech advocate. I mean, I've spent most of my adult life in the United States, and I've sort of inherited their attitude towards a maximal amount of free speech. I don't really believe in, hate speech laws or coming after people and fining them because they said the wrong thing about, they accidentally used the wrong transgender pronoun, or they spread vaccine misinformation when all they were trying to do was wrestle with what's true and what's not true in the middle of a public health emergency or whatever. But what's the thing about social media is the Elon Musks and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world will fall back on, look, we're not publishers. We don't publish anything. You can't be held to account for any of the stuff that's on our platform. It's just a platform.
It's cute.
People just use it. Unfortunately, that's nonsense.
It's a cute argument.
It's a cute argument. I mean, and it's nonsense because you've got the algorithm behind it. Like if Facebook were what Facebook was when Facebook was created, they'd have a point, which was it used to be a reverse chronological feed of all of the things that the people you follow had put up. There was no like button. There was no infinite scroll. There was no algorithmically delivered content that is tailor-made to your attention, to grab your attention.
They weren't favouring your favourites.
Exactly, that's right. Now they've got, everything is about engagement. Everything is about trying to get something that is going to have you hover over that video for as long as possible and or share it and or comment on it and or like it based on what they know you like. So there's this idea that they're not publishing is, as you say, cute. It's a bit twee. I mean, you are publishing because everything that's coming into this fire hose of a system that you've got is being cranked out by Silicon Valley engineers, many of whom are 22-year-olds riding skateboards in Menlo Park, who are brilliant at finding a way to
PhD maths and engineering.
That's right, to entice your neurological system to respond as with as much reptilian angst and kind of addiction as it possibly can to whatever it is that they're showing you. So I don't think it's actually a free speech versus anti-free speech thing. I think it's about managing information flows and the idea that we as a people just have to be held hostage to whatever ingenious junk food Zuckerberg and Musk can throw at us with no mechanism to push back other than to tell our children not to go on those websites, which is tricky, I think is a bit rich. Like I'm extremely leery of government control over what can and can't be said, but I think that in 50 years' time, we'll look back on this period and go, that was a crazy Wild West, and we had no idea. We'd just given everyone a machine gun, and we didn't know how to regulate it or how to figure it out. And I think there'll be a more nuanced collaboration, shall we say, between the people through their governments, democratically elected, and AI companies and social media companies to manage that flow of information. Because just like those tents came up miraculously on the lawns of all of those American universities, so too do the videos of Gazan babies with their limbs blown off go up on TikTok in a way that is suspiciously well curated. I don't know what the Chinese Communist Party, how they manage the TikTok algorithms. I don't know what role the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has in coaching the quote-unquote journalists, the citizen journalists who are in Gaza about how to tailor social media information so that it'll go well on Instagram. But these are not dummies. We saw ISIS in its first incarnation get quite good at social media. I mean, remember the US airmen in orange jumpsuits trapped in a cage in the desert being set on fire and stuff, like these huge spectacles, these big displays. They've gotten pretty good at it. Like jihadists, they know what they're doing. So you open that app and it's like you've got the whatever company is supplying those tents is also supplying your information about the world. On steroids. So the idea that the Australian government shouldn't play a role in softening that, understanding that, mitigating that, I think is crazy. We've got to get our arms around it somehow.
And who appoints the cabal of people who actually make the decisions?
In the government? Oh, you're always asking the tricky questions, Mark. I mean...
Or they'll appoint themselves.
They'll appoint themselves, won't they?
And then we're going to get fed exactly what they want us to see and not see.
I mean, part of the... part of the promise of public broadcasting, just to get a bit wonky for a second and a bit philosophical, since you've been banging on about poetry earlier on in the show, Habermas, Jürgen Habermas, the philosopher who came up with the idea of public broadcasting, was basically saying the only way that you're going to get true impartial information is by freeing it from the two core biases that can derange the information product. One is capitalism, where you don't want corporations and powerful people who have all the money to be influencing what stories get told. And the other is governments. You don't want people with all the guns to be deciding what gets told. The idea of the public sphere was that the government would fund it, but would have no control over it politically. And we've got pretty good at that. I mean, the ABC and the BBC are pretty good at having carved out a sphere of conversation that is independent of whatever party happens to be in power. And so maybe that's a model for regulating this stuff. You certainly don't want government partisans from the political party that happens to be in power telling us what we can and can't see on social media. But can you create a regulatory framework about what algorithms can and can't do that is overseen by people who are as impartial as, our public health bureaucrats you'd want them to be, or the chairman of the ABC you'd want them to be? Maybe. It's early days.
I'm going to be fascinated. For me, this whole program is not what you and I are talking about, but the whole program, how it's going to roll out, is quite fascinating.
What you and I are talking about is even more fascinating, Mark. Don't sell yourself short. This is it right here.
I want to change tack for a second. My producer told me you have been on Joe Rogan's show 6 or 7 times. I can't remember now.
7. Don't short sell me. Yeah.
So, what the fuck's going on there? Like, hey, tell me, how do you know Joe? Like, is it because you're both comedians?
No. I never got to anything like his level of success. I mean, I did a bit of stand-up when I first got to New York just to sharpen my chops and, get a feel for a live audience.
Pretty scary, though.
Yeah, pretty scary, yeah. Especially in a town like New York where, audiences can be brutal. But it's good training. I mean, it's once you get into a television studio, then having had the experience of
shitting your pants standing in front of it because no one's going to fucking laugh at what you said.
You can put it that way if you want. Yeah, it certainly gives you a keener sense.
Well, can I just quickly before we move on?
Yeah.
Just what was your shtick like in terms of your comedy act? I mean, what?
Oh, it was mostly. I mean, it was pretty intellectual. I think. I mean, it was observations. I mean, at the time, I'm pretty good at impressions. So,
really?
Yeah. When I moved over there, it was George W. Bush was still president, so I do quite a lot of Bush stuff.
Did you learn how to duck from a shoe being thrown at you? Whilst you're standing up there delivering your comedy?
Yeah, no. I mean, and so, and a fair bit about like Cheney and the Iraq War and the religious right and, just poking holes in things. It was good fun. It was well received. And I think Americans kind of like having a foreigner, cheekily take the piss out of them, especially in Aussie. You're non-threatening. You come in with goodwill, but you're also willing to highlight to them the ways that they know they're ridiculous. And so it was actually my first big job was the Huffington Post was at the time the most read online-only news website in the world. This is 2012.
I remember that period, yeah.
And there was a lot of buzz behind it. And they basically decided that they wanted to do to television what they'd done to newspapers and just destroy them completely and find a new way of having conversations. And so they launched HuffPost Live, which was a 12-hour-a-day streaming television network online. And I was one of the founding hosts and producers of that.
That's cool.
So I would host 4 to 6 half-hour shows every single day with newsmakers and with Thomas Friedman and Michael Moore and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or whoever it might be. And there was one moment that Joe saw go viral. It was one of the first. I think when they write the book about cancel culture, there will be a page for this moment, which was Stephen Colbert was doing his satirical show still. This was before Letterman retired. So you remember he was doing the Colbert Report. And he did a joke that an Asian American activist felt was racist against Asians. But it was satirical. and she was lined up, this activist that is, as a guest on my show the following day in a kind of wrap of the news and everything that's going on. And we started talking, and she started interrupting me and saying, like, well, I would certainly expect that a white man, would enjoy talking down to me. And I was like, well, hang on a second. We're just having a conversation. Like, I'm just trying to understand what your attitude towards.
This is live?
This is live on air. Yeah, streaming live.
That's cool. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Challenge.
And it's a challenge, exactly. I mean, there's no mistakes. Or when there are mistakes, that's just part of, live TV. I said, hang on, we're just having a conversation. Like, and she said, well, yeah, as a white man, you probably feel like it's your right to talk down to women of color. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, when I was being born with balls doesn't give me, doesn't mean that I don't have the right to have an opinion about satire. Like, she goes on like this, and like, it basically just ended in a flaming heap, and I was just like, well, okay, I mean, all right, see ya.
See you later.
Yeah, see you later. Yeah, if you don't want to talk to me, then we don't have much to talk about. It was this weird experience, Mark, that I've had many times since, but I'd never had it before then, and that was probably 2014. So this was just as like the kind of social justice reckoning was about to happen, right? Where you're talking to someone and you realize they're not actually talking back to me as a human. They're talking to me as a cardboard cutout avatar of white maleness. And they're expecting me to talk to them as a representative of some abstraction, some identity group, some oppressed minority. Like, we're supposed to be talking about comedy, satire, offence, cancellation, because she wanted to get Colbert cancelled. That was a whole petition about it. And instead of having a conversation where we treat each other as equals, we're having a conversation where two cardboard cutouts of different identity groups are sparring. And that went momentarily viral. Joe saw it. Someone texted me that he'd played it on his show. And so I think I just DM'd him on Twitter, or he hit me up and somehow said, next time you're in LA, why don't you come on the show? So I said, I just happened to be in LA in a few weeks, quickly booked my ticket to LA, just so I could have that experience. And he and I hit it off, and then I sort of had a standing invitation whenever I was in town.
So,
to
what
come
was
on
the
his
conversation
show.
about the show with Joe?
Well, I mean, everything. You know what his shows are like. You sit down for 3 hours and you talk about anything and everything. You just go wherever. So cancel culture.
And he was cool.
Oh, he was great. I mean, I love Joe, and he was the reason I have a podcast. He's been, he really is the pod father. He has been really caring and generous and supportive. He just pulled me aside after one of the shows. I don't remember whether it was the first or second or third. And he was like, "What are you doing with these dummies getting paid a paycheck? Go and do your own thing." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I think I will." And I started the precursor to Uncomfortable Conversations.
So tell me about Uncomfortable Conversations. So what's the format?
The format
go through the format now.
Yep. The format started as a one-on-one interview with a guest about some issue that we find difficult to talk about in a fair dinkum way.
With the guest or
with the guest?
The guest, but I mean, what I mean by this, the guest finds it difficult to talk about?
No, the guest doesn't have to. So sometimes people will listen to Uncomfortable Conversations and they'll go, "Oh, that wasn't actually an uncomfortable conversation at all," which is fine. The point is not to make the guest uncomfortable or to confect intentionally uncomfortable scenarios or anything. Sometimes that'll arise because I disagree with the guest on something. But the point is to have conversations about topics that if someone were to raise it at the pub or at a barbie or at work, everyone would just pucker up their bums a little bit and feel a little, are we going here? Are we? It'd create an uncomfortable situation. I want to create a safe space for dangerous ideas, a safe space for people to air those kinds of conversations. So that's the main thing. My first episode was with Stan Grant a couple of years ago now.
This is when Stan had the drama?
This is before that. So this was
only he only exited last year.
Yeah, it was pretty recent. And Stan and I are still mates, and he has been a great supporter of mine as well. Because we were actually getting real about race, not just mouthing the usual talking points about white guilt, but recognizing that there are difficult identity questions here, and asking. It's like, I will be accused of being, some white fascist if I raise a question about whether or not it's really necessary for 4 white middle-aged women who are on a Zoom call about HR to be doing acknowledgements of country before they start talking about the human resources issue. Like,
what do you say about that? I'd love to know, because
he's on the same page.
It sort of kills me a bit. Like I arrive on an aeroplane and land they go from Sydney to Brisbane, and I'm getting asked to thank the the ancestors. That's cool. But like and then I go to my meeting, and that's how we start off. One of my staff will start the meeting off. And hang on, like, what does Stan say about that?
He's not a huge fan of. I don't want to speak for him. Let's just say that I get the impression from him that he's not in lockstep with what the correct way of doing Indigenous rights is,
But that doesn't help Indigenous rights.
Well, exactly. I mean, it comes back to your point about guilt, right?
I think we've got this.
We've got this. It's a way for this class of mostly white, almost exclusively white, middle class, university educated people to signal to each other that they're on the right side, that they're on the right team, right? It's like putting he, him in your email signature, or she, her. Don't worry, Gary. No one was in any doubt that you're a dude. We all know you, Gary.
You don't give a fuck either.
Yeah. They don't care. Yeah. There was no ambiguity.
Yeah.
But it's a way of saying I care, right? I care, which is all very well until it becomes a conformist, lockstep, mandatory thing that if you decline to participate in, you're regarded as being a bad guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were having these kinds of conversations with Stan, and then I expanded it out to talk to, anyone and everyone, Malcolm Turnbull, or you on the pod as well.
Launched your book.
Yeah, that's right. And just to try.
I remember you talking about it actually during that period.
Yeah,
I think you might.
I might have had him on the ABC.
I think I had you on the ABC. Yeah, you had him on the ABC.
Right. I did. Yeah, that's right. And so now Uncomfortable. Now that my show at the ABC has fallen apart, Uncomfortable Conversations is going gangbusters because I can devote all my time to it instead of it being a side hustle. And so now we're expanding into doing things like live talkback, video segments.
You mean inviting audience?
Yeah, inviting the audience in, doing panel segments. Our last panel was with Ben Fordham, you just mentioned Ben, and Antoinette Lattouf. So like having people who spar a little bit on the couch, and that's all going up on YouTube, and interviewing people like Jimmy Carr, who I just had on the show, and comedians and stuff like that, rather than just going straight for the culture war jugular.
I love him.
He's a good man.
Although sometimes I go, oh, like when I'm watching him, I'm like, fuck.
That's the point, isn't it?
It is the point, but he does it with such a I can ask you a question. Yeah. Do you think he does it and uses comedy and satire as an excuse for what he's just done as a backdoor, or is he doing it for social awareness, for people to think about what it is he's saying and to have a debate perhaps after the show? Or is he just doing it for gags because he knows the audience is his cheer squad?
Gags.
He's
a comic.
Yeah.
And I think he would say that. Make him laugh. That's the rule. Make him laugh.
But it's his cheerleaders. But I don't know, maybe it happens occasionally, but most of the people who come to listen to him, in a live audience sense I'm talking about, are there because they like him.
Yes,
they like
exactly.
what he says.
That's right. Yeah. I asked him and people should listen to the episode or watch it on YouTube. It's because it's interesting. And I asked him about this, about haters on Twitter. And he was like, what happens is that people who weren't at the show get angry about it on social media, but there is no controversy about it at the show. I mean, the people who come to see a Jimmy Carr show are people who are cool with Jimmy Carr by definition, right? I mean, they want to, so... I mean, he said something interesting. This was actually the first video. I just joined TikTok. No, I have just now. I mean, this is all within the past few months.
Dude,
anyway.
get with the program. I'm even fucking on TikTok. What's wrong with you?
So we just tried. My first TikTok video that went past 1 million was Jimmy Carr making an interesting point where he goes, "Whatever it is that's going to get me cancelled, I said it 10 years ago. There's nothing I can say now that's going to be worse than the things that you can dredge up," which points to this other phenomenon that I talk about. I did a show at the Melbourne Comedy Festival just before the pandemic, which was about why social media is ruining everything. And I made the point that there's this whole phenomenon of what I call outrage archaeology, where, you know, people go back through your past tweets or the things you've said in the past or your old podcasts, like archaeologists, like they're trying to hunt for the jewel of, you know, of the most offensive thing. Like who's the comic who was Kevin? He was going to host the Academy Awards the year before last, and they went back and they found that 9 years before he tweeted something homophobic, which he'd apologised for. You know, or he'd said something in a routine that ended up on Twitter. And, you know, he ended up being uninvited from hosting the Academy Awards. Pretty big gig, because some outrage archaeologist has gone back and found something out of context from a previous time when norms were a bit different. And as far as Jimmy's concerned, I mean, he's right. We've all got the paper trail behind us now. I've been talking for long enough, in years now, that there are all kinds of things that I've said that I'm sure that if you go over it with a fine-tooth comb, you could create an outrage.
Do you worry about that?
No, I don't anymore, because I don't have an employer.
But did you worry about it?
Yes. And thank God I don't have to anymore.
I mean, do you remember, what was his name? He used to say, you know what I hate? But who was that famous comedian like 20, 30 years ago? I can't remember. He had a routine. You know what I fucking hate? I hate that. And he talked about haters, and he took the piss out of everyone. I mean, I used to love listening to him anyway. And this is 20 years ago, and he got a radio show for a little while, and then they cut him out of, he's on 2Day FM or Triple M, one of those things, and they cut him because he just upset so many people at the time. But
it wasn't Red Simons.
No, it wasn't Red, but it was around Red's time. It was, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, but irrespective. People have been taking the piss in comedy about the way society operates for so fucking long. And he was basically just reflecting how we are. Everyone would say, "I fucking hate that. I fucking hate." I mean, like, you know, you get the haters. Some people just hate everything.
Yeah, professional haters.
They sit with you and they're told you haven't seen it for ages. You went to school with them, year 12 with them. You haven't seen it for 22 years, and you sit down with them and they just fucking complain about everything, and they fucking hate everything. They don't use the word hate, but they just dislike everything. They've got no positive. They don't have a new thought on any issue. And I think people have been doing that for a long time. But this guy, he ended up getting cancelled. But Rodney Roode.
Oh, I remember Rodney Roode. Yeah. I mean, it's literally right there in his name, Mark.
Yeah, Roode. Rodney Roode. And that was his routine. Right. You know what I hate. You know what I hate. And but he ended up getting cancelled. But it took a long time to get cancelled. But society didn't cancel him. Some dude, like somebody like in management or someone at the top of the tree got rid of him because somebody would have prodded him a little bit and probably said, well, that guy's like, he's upsetting too many people. But today you get cancelled by the numbers, and like hordes of people will all have an opinion on whether or not Josh Szeps should be saying what he's saying. Why do you think all of a sudden there are audiences have all of a sudden got the say that management ordinarily would have?
Yeah. Well, they're loud and angry. I mean, there are professional umbrage takers who will take umbrage at whatever it is that they can find and will try to coerce cowardly management.
So that's the issue.
I think that's the issue, yeah. And management is too jumpy and they don't stand by people enough.
Is it because the management want to be liked? We all want to be liked?
Yes, I think they're afraid of the optics of seeming like they're not taking seriously the concerns about the microaggressions and the victimization, and that they're not on board with, again, this kind of orthodoxy of social justice. And like they want to seem like they're the good guys. They don't want to seem like out of touch. Like there's nothing... No one is more woke, just to use that problematic term. No one is more woke than a terrified... like white, straight, middle-aged man who is trying to do the right thing by the kids who are coming with pitchforks and flaming torches, you know?
But I'd like to understand what your view is. Is it about not being disliked? They don't want to be disliked, or is it more about I want to be liked? Because, and I want to go right back to Facebook. You know, Facebook, Instagram, they've created this like thing. And they've worked out, well, their scientists have worked out that in an evolutionary sense, for us to survive, we got to be liked by our community, because if we get fucked over by a community, we won't survive. That's an evolutionary instinct in our brain, and they've worked this stuff out, and that's why everybody wants you to press the like on your Instagram page or Facebook page, et cetera, et cetera. They've created this like world, and I've often wondered to myself, the decision makers who make these decisions about when they're getting pressured by groups, is it they're doing it because they don't want to be disliked? or is it because they want to be seen as being liked as an organisation? So let's talk with the ABC. The ABC wants to be liked as an organisation by its audience. Have you ever thought that through?
No, it's an interesting question. Tease it out for me. Why is it important to you, the distinction between avoiding dislike and clamoring for like?
I don't have a particular view. I just see that it as binary, because there are, and I've often no, I don't see it as binary. I've often wondered, is there an instinct within us, in our brain somewhere, that don't be disliked? It doesn't. It's not the same as being liked, but you can't be disliked, because if you're disliked,
I think that's it.
You're on the outside.
I think that's it. Yes, don't be excluded. Don't be excluded.
Because you're in trouble
from the
when
team.
you're excluded.
Exactly. That's right.
And why is it you don't care? Why does Josh Szeps doesn't care whether he's disliked? So in an evolutionary sense, why do you think that you've chosen not to care? Is it because, if you're disliked, is it because Josh also realises he can create his own community of people who are going to like him for not caring about being disliked? And therefore, you've got your own community. Now you're protected.
I'm a troublemaker. I'm a troublemaker.
Yeah, but people like troublemakers.
I'm a troublemaker before the community of troublemakers follows me. I mean, I would sooner be a lone outsider with no friends, but my own internal credibility, and just have faith that at some point people are going to value authenticity, credibility, and straight talk more than they do sycophancy and conformism. And honestly, whether a tribe is with me or not is secondary to me. I mean, I'm just a sucker for like intellectual honesty. It doesn't even feel like a choice to me. It feels like a drive.
Okay, I like it, because I just want to quickly, I'm getting wound up here, but I want to keep going on about this a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I won't do a Joe Rogan 3 hour on you. Don't worry. Because for me, I've always had this view on instinct versus intellect. And I sometimes feel as though most of society operates on instinct, which is the like or dislike argument. And whereas intellect takes me to another level. And when I say another level, I don't mean better or worse. I mean, it just takes me to a different level, a different universe, whereby I override my instincts with intellect. And that not just in relation to commentary on what society's doing, the sorts of things you and I do, but it's also like temptation, fucking knocking myself around, take drugs, don't take drugs. I mean, I always take the view, I like to take the view, and I don't always achieve it personally, but I like to take the view that my intellect is always greater than my instincts. Sometimes my instincts do overtake, and I've really tried hard over my 68 years to fucking work that out, and I fight. My intellect tries to fight back, but I'm quite interested in this instinct versus intellect and how the brain works.
I am highly intellectual to an almost like Asperger's-y degree.
I can see that.
In terms of being, it doesn't come naturally to me to meet other people empathically, wherever they are.
Because that's instinct. Instinct is being that's empathetic.
That's right. I don't have that sensitivity, for example, that my partner does. He's very, very good at tuning into people's emotional wavelength. Okay. I'm not. I'll just go straight to the brain and go
someone else in the world's like that, because I know I often get criticised for being this by people in a personal level, by people who know me closely. That people think that I lack the empathy. Someone might send a text that says "I love you," and I might go, "Oh, thank you."
Right? Yeah.
Because I don't really see the fucking point of the word. I mean, it's the dumbest fucking word in the fucking in the old dictionary. Because I love my dog, I love food, I love what the fuck, just articulate a little bit more, because I don't even know how to respond to it. I sort of do, but I know what society would say how to respond to it, but in terms of how I really feel about it, I think it's just a dumb fucking word.
But are you motivated by being liked or avoiding being disliked? Yeah, right. Yeah. But see, now I wonder whether or not that sensibility, which you and I share, if you want to get psychoanalytic about it, is driven, like the flattering interpretation to us is to say we're galaxy brains who can override our base instincts with our minds. The less flattering interpretation, which comports with your thesis that people are generally driven by a desire to be liked, would be we're the types of people who maybe when we were younger didn't fit in and didn't find it easy to fit into the cool kids club, and therefore took a posture of, you know what, any club that would have me as a member, I don't want to be part of anyway. And so, I'm different. I'm special. I don't need to obey your rules. I'm a contrarian.
So you adapted.
I think so. That's probably
But do you think was that you? Were you that kid?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I probably was too. I wasn't pushed out of groups or I wasn't not accepted into groups. But at the same time, I didn't care.
Yeah,
I didn't try to be in the group.
Are you sure you didn't?
I didn't.
Are you sure that the not caring wasn't a consequence of exclusion?
I don't really remember being excluded as such. I mean, like most things I did quite well, like sport and blah blah blah. I was like, I was in footy teams and at school, academically and stuff. I don't think so. I do believe I just didn't care. Like my mates would ring me up and say, "Well, we're all going to meet down the road when we're 15, and." I don't know, steal stuff off cars and stuff. And not that I had a moral position, but I said, I can't be bothered, I'm not coming. I don't. I'd just rather stay home, whatever. I'd read my book or whatever. So my position is, here you're interviewing me now, but my position is, I don't know if I could well have had that somewhere in my background. I don't really know. I haven't done a psychoanalytic sort of exercise on it, but it's interesting because that's why I sort of warmed to you without even having met you, listening to you on radio. I liked listening to you on the radio. That's why I like listening to Adam because he's a bit odd too. Not to say we're odd, but he's a bit different.
No, I mean, I'll take odd. That's a compliment to me.
Odd, for me, odd's good too.
Weird, odd, thinking about things in a strange way. This is part of what I worry about with just going back to the likes on social media versus the likes in the real world where you can touch the grass and actually, have conversations with people that aren't limited by the number of characters you can put in a tweet. Like part of what's corrosive about the way that we're living is so much of our social groups and so much of our likes and, strokes, our social strokes are coming mediated through machines where not only are you chasing the wrong kinds of respect, because mostly it's conformism. Like the way that the either side, exactly. Yeah. The easiest way to get a lot of likes on social media is to go on and say, I stand with the people of Gaza. Yeah. I stand with my trans allies. I stand with the women of Australia against domestic violence. Oh, bravo, what a brave position. You don't believe that men should beat and murder their wives. How enlightening. This is incredible. Talk to me about this moral revelation, this epiphany that you've had. It's so bloody facile. Yeah. And yet that is actually the currency that we're swimming in. And it's distracting us. It's capturing our attention. It's a bit like you're walking around with another version of Josh Szeps on your shoulder who's constantly monitoring your life and looking at your life and saying, is that thought something that you should be broadcasting that would get you likes? Is that, coffee something that you should put on Instagram and would get likes? Something as facile as a meal that you've had going on Instagram to something as complicated as making a geopolitical commentary about the most intractable conflict in the world in Israel and Gaza. It's all being filtered through this kind of meta experience of witnessing yourself having experiences and then pushing those experiences through the algorithm and the filter of going, am I going to get more likes and followers and strokes by disseminating this to the world? So it's like, for me personally, I don't use social media anymore. I use it as a broadcasting platform to push out my content, but I no longer engage with it. And we only get one life, as far as we know. This is actually it. Today is the actual day when you're experiencing today. You're never going to get today back. You're never going to get to interface with reality and touch the grass and look at people and wrestle with ideas in this moment again. And yet most of us spend that moment, whether we know it or not, with a little editor in the back of our brain who works for Meta or Elon, saying, is this content? Is this content that can get me the social kudos that if we weren't embedded in social media would come from actually sitting down and having a cup of tea with somebody and talking to them. Like, something's happening to our brains and the way that they're being hijacked that is making it increasingly difficult to have interesting, unusual, innovative, contrarian conversations, and is dialing up the reward for having facile, conformist ones.
So do you think that is actually being consciously done?
No, I think it's just the algorithm doing what algorithms do. That's what our attention, by definition, you're going to engage with things that either reinforce what you already believe or demonize what you don't already believe. The messy, muddy space of wrestling with things in a complicated, nuanced way is not an instantaneous dopamine hit, right? It takes more thought.
It takes energy as well.
It takes energy.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, and people who value that are my audience. Like, if you value that, come and subscribe to Uncomfortable Conversations, be part of the team, be part of the journey. And it is a tribe of the tribalists. It is a tribe of people who just want to talk about things without caring about whether or not they tick the correct checkbox on a preset list of opinions that you're supposed to have in order to make you a good progressive or a good conservative. Like, I just want to be all over the map. I want to be as heterodox as possible because I want to be as honest as possible, and neither side has a monopoly on the truth.
Do you think that part of the success of your podcast, your show, is your, I'll call it amazing, control of your literate brain and your ability to articulate in such a, I won't call it polished, but quite beautiful way. Like, you speak very well. I mean, one of the things I remember listening to the radio, I thought, this dude can put a sentence together. Your command of the English language is very good, but you do it in, you don't do it in a posh way or a pompous way. It sort of just works. How important is that to you?
It's everything. I mean, it's my bread and butter. Yeah, it doesn't hurt, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed because it's, I mean,
is it natural or it's
natural?
developed?
It's natural. It's like, I am really, really grateful. There's so much to be grateful about. Grateful that I'm born in Australia, grateful for so many things. But, whatever it is that you've got in your toolkit, that's that one thing that you can really lean on. If I could tell young people anything, I mean, it would be like, find the thing that it sounds facile, but it's only, you have to reach middle age before you realize that it's profound, because it sounds stupid when you're in your 20s. But like, find the one thing that you're a lot better at than other people are. And there'll almost always be something. And then the trick is in monetizing that.
Yeah.
Right? There might not be a job. What kind of a job is radio host? There aren't a lot of them around. It's a rarefied spot to get to, especially like intellectual radio host who's required to have half-hour-long, highfalutin conversations about something. So if you can't get that, then just make your own thing, and that's what the podcast is basically. Now I don't have to worry about whether or not management thinks it's okay to question Mardi Gras and gay pride. I don't care.
And can I ask you, it's a bit of a personal question, but are your parents still around?
Yes, Dad's got Alzheimer's, so he's half around.
I was going to say, what do they think of their son?
Oh, very proud
in doing what you're doing now and what you've done in the past.
Yeah, very proud. Very proud. Dad was born in a refugee camp in Switzerland during the war to Jewish parents. Which I
presume means he's Jewish.
Well, yeah, which means he's Jewish. Yeah, so he has an incredible story of escape, and his mum. Yeah, he was raised in Paris and actually spent his 7th birthday in an orphanage in Paris when his mum was sick, but was raised when he was very young by a staunch Lutheran family in Switzerland who took him in out of the refugee camp. He was born in 1943. And his mum managed to scrounge up enough money to bring him and his sister out to get out of Europe, and she had been a penniless Jewish refugee from Poland who spent the war fleeing the Nazis in France. And she got to the port in France where they were loading these huge refugee boats to go to the New World. And she went up to the clerk who was signing people in, and the clerk said, "You can go to the United States or Canada or Australia." And she had no understanding of geography, so she just said, "Which one's further from here?" He put down Australia, and they came out to Australia. And so Dad has always had an extreme reverence, I would say, for contrarianism, for pushing through. He's got a refugee spirit. He's someone who doesn't take no. And Mum is just this fabulous font of love and wisdom, who, as long as I'm happy, she'll be happy.
Yeah, so, just dedicated to her son's
well-being. Yeah. And
that's cool.
Like, at the end of look, if I was making a living being a neo-Nazi, she might draw the line. But I don't think I'm doing anything. If in any other scenario, there would be respect for people who, look, I suppose we've always been a minority, like the kind of Christopher Hitchenses of the world, the people who are always trying to find the angle that is against what the mainstream think. But it's an honourable tradition, and it's just upsetting to me that now progressives who think they're on the right side of history have inherited a censoriousness and an intolerance which traditionally was associated with the right. Like, the right bangs on a lot about free speech and cancel culture and wokeness these days, but it's pretty hypocritical because, when Monty Python was releasing The Life of Brian, it wasn't the left that was calling for it to be cancelled. It was the religious conservatives. McCarthyism in the United States, the anti-communist crackdowns and the witch hunts, that was the right. The right mastered cancel culture long before the left got wind of it. And it's just in the past decade or so, I suppose, that the left has unfortunately taken up the tactics of the old right in creating a kind of a purity test. And these are the things that we believe that we hold sacred. And there is a certain sanctity around the opinions that you're supposed to have about racial inequality, about gender inequality, about gender identity. And if you transgress those, now the left goes batshit crazy the same way that the right used to go crazy if you transgressed, if you were offensive or if you were blasphemous in some way. I just think the volume needs to be turned down all over, and we need to rediscover a small L liberal tolerance towards a plurality of views and try to cast the net of acceptable conversation as wide as possible. I honestly think that's the only way we're going to solve the problems of the 21st century.
Just tone it down.
Tone it down and expand the landscape. The 21st century is going to be really, really tricky. The intersection of artificial intelligence, climate chaos, and the rise of China and disruptions to liberal democracy and the alternative path of, and whatever new world order Putin wants to introduce.
Or dictatorships
in general. It's going to be hard to manage. And you can't know what the correct path is unless you have the maximum number of voices all arguing about it and chipping in so that you can grope towards what the best course is. If you carve out, if you make it forbidden to talk about race or sex or sexuality or whatever it might be in advance, if you earmark a certain set of opinions as being beyond the pale before you even talk about them, how are you going to know what's true?
Well, that's the greatest form of censorship. One more last question I'd just like to ask you, if you don't mind.
Of course.
And I haven't had anybody I've asked this question of for a long time. Do you think that Australia should have a Bill of Rights for its citizens, similar to what they have in the USA, and talk about things like freedom of speech and et cetera, et cetera?
I go back and forth on it. At the moment, I'm a no, because at the moment, if you wrote a Bill of Rights...
A modern Bill of Rights, I should say, not the American Bill of Rights, because it's out of date.
Yeah, but if you wrote it now, then the social justice warriors would get in there and they'd make everyone have a right to not have their gender questioned, which would mean that people, for example, feminists like Germaine Greer, or comedians like Barry Humphries, who took the position that there's such a thing as biological males and biological females, could be in breach of the Bill of Rights. But if what you mean is a Bill of Rights that enshrines freedom of speech, in some respects, I feel like the absolutism of the American approach causes more problems than it solves.
The reason I say it is because during the COVID period, I kept thinking to myself, governments can actually do whatever they want. They can just... And I thought to myself, we don't really have a Bill of Rights here. There is legislation which says you can't do this, you can't do that, to protect people's rights. There's rights protection legislation, which sort of therefore by definition is a sort of like a number of bills of rights. But during the COVID period, I thought to myself, we don't have one in Australia, and my rights are being determined by other parties based on epidemiological studies and models and all that sort of stuff, which to some extent I didn't agree with. I'm talking about the modelling, the mathematics of the modelling. I'm not talking about protecting people from getting COVID. I'm talking about how they model these things, because models by definition are always wrong.
You're talking to somebody, by the way, who wrote an opinion piece at the end of 2021 in the Sydney Morning Herald saying, is it time to start thinking of having a national conversation about the human rights implications of the lockdowns?
I didn't know that, but that's my position.
I literally wrote the article at a time when it was extremely unpopular because everybody felt like that was killing grandma. But I interviewed on my ABC show.
It's turned out to be right.
At the time, this is the end of 2021 when we were basically all vaccinated, and we still had ridiculous scenarios like a woman who I interviewed who flew from Melbourne to Adelaide with her family to see her family, with her little kids, to see her family for the first time since the lockdowns began. There was one person on her flight who tested positive for COVID the next day. So the police came to her hotel in Adelaide and took the whole family and locked them up and wanted to lock them up for 2 weeks. And after 5 days, she made such a fuss that she was driven in police convoy to the border of South Australia and dumped out into the border of onto the Victorian side of the border after having been incarcerated for 5 days. All of them were COVID negative, but just because she'd been on the same plane as someone who had COVID. And I used that as a way of saying, like, at what point do we start saying the human rights of this woman are more important than whatever epidemiological solution you thought you were achieving in terms of tracking and tracing that disease? So when you put it that way,
or is it a conversation that maybe not someone's just going to get here's the bill? Maybe that's probably a silly way of putting it. But should there be a conversation around this?
Yes, there should certainly be a conversation.
Well, no one's offered it.
No, that's true. I would have. We need to get ahead of a lot of stuff. We need to get ahead of AI. We need to get ahead of the next pandemic, which will come and it'll be worse. A pandemic that is deadlier.
The next one always will be worse because they adapt.
Right.
Because it's there to control the host. By definition.
Exactly. That's right.
So it will do it.
Yeah. And there may be smaller ones, but there will be bigger ones.
Yep.
And so I think that would be a good idea, having some kind of a national roundtable where people could come together. And
or do you think it's not possible?
No, I think it's possible.
Do you think it's possible to settle on something though?
I have to have faith in democracy, Mark. We're grown-ups.
So do you think it's going to be Anthony Albanese, or it's going to be is it going to be Chris Minns? What do you think? Do you think that we have the capacity to settle
yes,
on something?
I think you could have a national cabinet where the premiers sit down with the Attorney General, with the federal Attorney General, and Health Minister and Prime Minister, and you get academics together and you get human rights people together, and you just hammer out, even if it's not a Bill of Rights, a one pager about
a discussion page.
Yeah, this is what we expect as Australians. This is what we expect of our government.
Sort of like a code of conduct.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
As opposed to a bill where you can talk about. I'm not going to answer that question because I've got a bill. There's been something put past the Parliament that protects me.
Yeah, that's right. it's everything is messy. Basically, I think the only solution is conversations. I don't think any Bill of Rights or constitutions aren't worth the paper they're written on unless they're enforced by courts, and courts aren't worth their salt unless they're backed up by the good faith of the political process, and the political process isn't worth its salt unless the military obeys what the politicians tell it to do. And at the end of the day, everything is a conversation. Everything is trust, is a story, really, right? It's like, what's money? Money is nothing. Money is relationships, right?
Yeah.
Money is, investments in things. So to me, looking for that one thing that's going to save us, like the Bill of Rights or something, is a bit of a fool's errand. Like, my mission is to have a platform, uncomfortable conversations, where people can have conversations about uncomfortable things in ways that are as inclusive and as interesting and satisfy people's intellectual curiosity as much as possible. And I just hope that is one piece of a larger mosaic, like one piece of a jigsaw that can contribute to a sane and prosperous future. It's not going to be the whole answer, but I'm pretty convinced that landscape of having conversations in an honest and generous way is the easiest Like that's the path of least resistance to our success as a culture.
Josh Szeps, to use a controversial word, I loved it.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.